All righty. Good morning or good afternoon, depending on where you are in this, oh my gosh, oh so crazy world right now. But you are in the right place if you are here for the webinar on Event Planning Playbook, how to get the most out of your event data and eliminate big surprises. I don't know, I sometimes like surprises, but I don't like big surprises when it's coming to my events, I can tell you that much. And we are here with the wonderful Aura Innovative Technology team, and we're going to dig in deep today on what in the heck to do with all this data. I mean, I'm leaning in. I run events. I have an event called Non-Doozapalooza right now, and I'm not gonna lie, I've got a lot of data swimming around this event, and I don't know what the heck to do with it. So I'm excited to learn from this Aura team today as well. I'm Terry Cardin. I am the founder of ReviewMyAMS.com and co-founder of a new to the market software solution called 100 Reviews. For those of you that may not know, Review My AMS is home to more than 1,125, oh my gosh, we're in the thousands, people, end user reviews on 70 association management systems. It's as simple as you give a review of your current AMS, and once the review is published, then you get access to read all the reviews. So when companies like Aura support Review My AMS like they do, which is why that we're a part of this partner webinar today, it means that Aura understands transparency in the AMS marketplace and why it's so important that associations have a voice. They really get it, that the opinions on these technologies matter. And you know what, guys? They're listening. They've got their ear to the ground on what's happening in this association technology industry. So as we prepare for today, I'm going to ask you to think about this quote from John Wooden. This is a good time, just take a deep breath. You're excited to learn something new, and think about this quote. Things work out best for those who make the best of how things work out. So before we jump in, and now that you've taken your deep breath, we're going to go over a couple housekeeping items. I'm going to turn it over to Kevin in just a few moments. But just as an FYI, this webinar is being recorded. We will email it to you, so you can access it by the email, or you can hunt it down in the Review My AMS blog in the next week or so with a few of the key takeaways. Feel free to pass that along to another team member, possibly somebody that's actually on the events team that couldn't be with us today. You can harass me for it, or I'm sure you can harass Kevin or anybody from the Aura team that's here as well, and we'll get it to you. And again, feel free to pass it along to your colleagues if you find it helpful. We fully expect your wheels to be turning, and we have a feeling you're going to have some good questions for Kevin. So ask away. We're going to take the last few minutes at the end to field all your burning questions. But you don't have to wait till the end to ask your question. At any time during the presentation, feel free to just use that question or chat panel there in the Zoom window, and we'll do our best to get your questions answered there at the end. So now let's get down to today's business. And for that, I'm going to turn it over to my Aura friend, Kevin. Kevin, take it away.
Great. Thank you so much, Terry. Hopefully you can keep your energy going for the rest of this presentation. That really got me hyped up already. So thank you, everyone, for coming to today's presentation and for taking the time for attending. Like Terry said, today we'll be going through our own webinar called Event Planning Playbook, how to get the most out of your event data and eliminate big surprises. So first, quick introduction as to who I am. So my name's Kevin Zoe. I'm currently a consultant with Aura Innovative Technology, which you saw on the earlier slide. I have a few years of experience working with both AMS and ERP systems. In particular, I've worked extensively with an ERP system called NetSuite, but I've briefly worked with quite a few others on the market as well. I have a lot of experience with both the process design, so advising clients how they may choose to modify their organizational practices in order to better suit the systems that they use, as well as a lot of practice with technical design. So maybe that comes in the form of customizations, scripting even, essentially building your platform in a way that suits your organization best. All right, and a quick blurb about our organization or Innovative Technology. So we are a Chicago-based consulting firm, who have worked extensively with organizations in the nonprofit sector as well as associations themselves. And we've been doing this for approximately 15 years now, with a quick sample of the services that you see below. We're mostly specialized in custom web development, but we've done a handful of integrations, as well as implementations for some systems such as NetSuite, Aptify, and various SaaS products. You can also see at the bottom that we are proud partners of a couple of the logos down there. Okay, well, without further ado, I'm going to jump right into our presentation, the meat of what we're going to be doing for today. So I'm going to stop sharing this PowerPoint, and when I start sharing my screen again, I will be in our ERP system of choice to demonstrate for today's session. Okay, I hope everyone can see my screen now. It should show Oracle NetSuite in the top left, as well as a little H logo up there. So a quick overview of what we're going to be going over today. What we've decided to do today is show you within the NetSuite system the process of going through an approval workflow. So starting from a purchase order, approving that, paying the purchase order through receiving a vendor bill, possibly approving that as well, and then looking at the reporting that you can get out of that. So really focusing on the expense side of the event planning process. In addition to that, well, we're also going to be using a system called NetSuite for basically the entirety of today's demonstration. Now, some of you might already be familiar with this system, some of you may not, but for those who are not, I'm just going to give a quick explanation as to what NetSuite is. So NetSuite is primarily a cloud-based ERP system. When you hear ERP, that stands for Enterprise Resource Planning. Essentially, you would use NetSuite as your core financial system, recording your transactions in it, getting your income statement, your balance sheets out of it. But there's a lot of other features that lend it into being usable as both a CRM system as well as a marketing platform, potentially for your organization. And you might see some of that as we go through the process today. Okay, and before I get into it, as Terry mentioned at the start of the day, this is really going to be kind of more of an open forum kind of session. So if you guys have any questions as I'm going through today's presentation, feel free to put them in the Zoom group chat. If I see them pop up and I think it's pertinent, we'll cover them immediately. If not, we'll also have time at the end of today's presentation where I'll go over all of the questions and any additional ones you guys might have. Okay, so let's go right into it. So come with me to a land of imagination, or perhaps not imagination for some of you who might work in the event planning space. And think about planning a gala for your organization. So let's say you're right in the midst of planning it. You're filling out a bunch of your purchase orders with your different vendors in order to make sure that you can get all of the resources necessary in order to actually put the gala on. So right in this first stage, we're in the stage of wanting to create these purchase orders and then route them to approval to the appropriate individuals. So what we're going to do first is we're going to show you the three main individuals who are going to be part of today's process. That's going to be myself, Kevin Zoe, acting as an AP clerk, someone named Hayden, who's going to be acting as the purchasing manager, as well as someone named Debbie, who's going to be the senior executive. And don't worry about memorizing those names. We'll take a quick look at those records first. So let's first take a look at mine. What I'm doing at the top here is entering in the search bar, which looks at all of the records within the NetSuite system. The employee record for myself, Kevin Zoe. I'm going to pop that open. And you can see here, again, just some rudimentary information regarding myself. My name's Kevin Zoe. I have a job title for AP clerk, and my supervisor is Amy Nguyen. However, there are a lot of organizations and a lot of circumstances that you might have where you don't necessarily want your direct supervisor to be the one actually approving your purchase orders. Maybe you want someone in the purchasing department to be the person actually approving them. So in that case, what we're able to do in our system is if we come into this tab called Human Resources right down here and scroll down, you can see here that there's this field called Purchase Approver. And for all of our purchase orders that we need to get approved, they're going to be routed to Aiden. And as you might recall, Aiden is going to be our purchasing manager in this scenario. You can also see here that our purchase limit is $0 and our purchase approval limit is $0. This essentially just signifies that if we enter any kind of purchase order into the system, we can't approve it ourselves. It always has to be approved by someone else, at least to some degree. So that's the important pieces to look at there. Next, we'll take a look at Aiden. So here we could go into the top search bar and look up his record again, or you could see here that this is actually a hyperlink. So let me just click on that. This brings us to Aiden's profile, again, purchasing manager. And if we go into the human resources section, we can see, oh, for Aiden, he actually has a purchase limit of $500 and a purchase approval limit of $500. What this means is that if there are any purchase orders that go to Aiden to approve that are over $500, they would also then get routed to a person called Debbie. And Debbie is going to be our senior executive in this case. So let's take a quick look at her record. Again, Debbie Green, job title, senior executive. And finally, if we take a look at her purchase limit, you can see here that she has no purchase approver, and her purchase limit and purchase approval limit is just an arbitrarily large number. What you could also do in your organization is have multiple more levels of approval. So I've seen organizations go up to even 5 or 6 different levels of approval, kind of at their largest chains that they have in their organization. So you could absolutely have more than just 3 people as part of this process. But for the sake of simplicity, we're going to show off just the 3 today. And what we're going to do first is actually create a purchase order. So again, coming back to original situation, let's assume that you're in this stage where the gala hasn't happened yet, and you're just making sure to communicate with all of your vendors and coordinating with them. Hey, we're going to need, maybe $300 of food, $400 of food. Let's put that into our system right now so that we can get it approved and get it on our books, essentially. Okay, so first, what we're going to do is we're going to enter a different role in the NetSuite system. So some ERP and AMS systems might handle this a little bit differently, so just stay with me here. But basically, as Kevin Zoe, as an AP clerk, I would not be in this administrator role probably all the time. I probably wouldn't even have access to this role. Instead, I would probably have access to this AP clerk role here. And as you might imagine, the purchasing manager will probably have access to the purchasing role, and the senior executive will have access to the senior executive role. And these will all come into play a little bit later on in today's presentation. So let's go into the AP clerk role. And you can see here, we have a few different aspects on the dashboard. So we have like a weekly payables trend. These are just graphs that we can modify on the dashboard itself if we wanted to. But more importantly than that, we actually have a section up here called reminders. And this is something that I think is really great to use in basically any kind of ERP or AMS system. And that's the ability to create queries in order to help you see what kind of transactions you might still need to do work on. So for example, as an AP clerk, I got some more bills to pay, I got some purchase orders to bill, and I have some purchase orders to receive. But let's assume, we're going to ignore all of these right now. We just want to go in there and create a brand new purchase order. So let's go ahead and do that. In order to do that as an AP clerk, we're going to go to vendors, purchases, and then enter purchase orders. And here you might have noticed, or this might look similar to what you've seen in your current systems, just a simple form in order to fill out some of the details with the purchase order itself. In particular, we're going to have to select the vendor. You can see this little red asterisk means it's a mandatory field. So let's presume in our situation, we're going to be ordering, I don't know, $800 worth of beverages from Chipotle. Why Chipotle? I don't know, maybe they had a great deal on beverages for their catering. So we set our vendor as Chipotle Inc. The date and the purchase order number already gets pre-populated. And then you can see on the side here, we have two additional fields. And these are the important fields for this approval chaining process. The first one is the approval status field. So here you can see right now it's set to pending approval. And then we also have the next approver field. And it's already set to Aiden. And the reason why it's already set to Aiden is because we have a workflow, basically an automation running in the background that checks who we are. It checks the fact that, hey, I'm Kevin Zoe logged into the system right now. And on my employee record, my expense approver is Aiden. Therefore, when we come into a purchase order, such as this, let's automatically set Aiden as the person who actually needs to be the one approving it. What you could also do is come in here and manually set it to someone else if you wanted to. You could also disable this field to make sure that people can't change it themselves if you wanted to. So a lot of different customizations you can do around this process, even just from a field level. Moving further on, what we're going to be doing is actually filling out the purchase order now. So let's say this is part of the food and beverages department. And for the class, let's say this is part of the 2020 fundraising gala. So you can see here in this section for classification that we have these different fields called department, class, location. This is how our system categorizes and basically cuts up your data into manageable chunks, manageable basically categories for you to look at in your reporting later on, which we'll cover closer to the end of the presentation. But for now, just remember that you saw that we marked this transaction with these different classifications. In addition to that, let's go ahead and put in a beverages item here for the amount of, let's say $800. And then we'll also want to set the department, food and beverages, and the class of the 2020 gala here as well. All right, so if I was the person entering in this purchase order, my job is basically done here. I'm going to save this. And it's just going to take a few seconds to save within the system. And now you can see here that there's this big blue box saying pending approval. Why is it saying pending approval? Well, because the approval process, or approval status rather, is still set to pending approval. And you can see here that we can't really do anything with this until it's actually approved. So what we have to do now is wait for someone like Aiden, for example, to log into NetSuite as well, and to actually go in and approve this purchase order for us, which we'll go ahead and do right now. So for the sake of today's demonstration, I'm not actually going to be logging out and logging back in as different people. I'm just going to be the Kevin Zoe login for the entire time, but I will be going into the different roles to demonstrate how they might look. So I'll go into the purchasing role. Again, this is the role that Aiden would likely have. You can see he has a much different dashboard than mine. He's got a whole list of, different purchase orders and, maybe expediting lists for what they are, some different shortcuts, purchase price variance, for example. And all of these things come both pre-configured and can be customized. So once we're in this role, we'll look to our reminders, dashboard, portlet again. And we can see there's a few here, but most importantly, we have one for purchase orders to be approved. And that's what we care about. So if we refresh this, again, you can see one purchase order to be approved. Let's click on that. And we get brought into this section right here. So let's view this purchase order. You can see it's pending approval. And let's go ahead and edit this. Now, if I were actually logged in as Aiden, what would happen here is this next approver would immediately be set to Debbie Green. Instead, what I'm going to do is just manually set it, for the sake of today's presentation, but that's what you can essentially customized to have occur in the system. We would come in here, we would save this again. It's still in the pending approval process step, because again, this $800 is above the $500 limit for Aiden to approve. Now that the next approver is Debbie, let's go into the senior executive role, open that up. And you can see again in this reminders dashboard portlet, let's refresh it, and one purchase order to be approved appears there. Let's open this one up. And finally, we can actually come in here and change this approval process or approval status, excuse me, finally to approved. Or we could reject it if we wanted to as well. So let's approve this. Again, just give it a second to load. And now finally, you can see that instead of being in the pending approval state, it has now moved to the pending receipt state. So once it's in this pending receipt state, as Debbie, we probably not the person who wants to actually be the person receiving and putting the item receipts into the system. We probably want that to be done by our AP clerk, for example. So let's go back to the AP clerk role, refresh this portlet. And hey, you might have seen that before I refreshed it, it said 92 purchase orders to receive, but now it says 93. So let's again open this up, sort by the date. 10/8/2020, this is the one that we just created. Let's view that. And boom, as the AP clerk, you can see that we have some additional buttons up here now. We can receive this, we could bill it before receiving it if we wanted to, or we could even close this purchase order if for whatever reason we never ended up actually receiving the product and chose not to. But let's go ahead and just receive this now. And I will just click this in order to do so. What this does is this brings you to an item receipt record. Not much to say here other than just saying that it signifies that you've actually received the item in your system. One important thing that you can see too, though, is this created from. And this is something that's really powerful in what we've built out, is that any transactions that are linked together in a logical fashion. So for example, the purchase order logically would create an item receipt and logically creates a vendor bill. They have links going back and forth so that you can very easily find the originating transaction or any subsequent transactions. So let's go ahead and save this item receipt, just saying that we received it. And then if we go back to the purchase order, you can see it's changed again. Now we're not pending receipt, we're pending bill. And in the pending bill stage, this is probably the time where your gala has already finished. Maybe you're waiting 1 week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks for your vendor to actually give you an invoice. And when they finally do, is when you're going to come in here and click this bill button. Now, when you click this bill button, what's going to happen is it's going to open up a vendor bill transaction, again, populated with all of that information that you saw before. So you don't really need to change anything, except for one potential piece. And this potential piece is very important. So let's assume there's a situation, you might have seen this before, where you put in a purchase order for $800. But something happened during the gala, or something happened during the actual purchasing process where you ordered more, or they gave you more, and they didn't actually accurately calculate the price at first. And what they end up doing is they end up invoicing you for more money than your purchase order originally said. Let's say they invoiced you for $880 instead. So what you would do is you would keep the purchase order the exact same. Don't go back and edit that. Instead, you would just come into this vendor bill and put in the correct amount, the actual amount you got invoiced. So let's say you got invoiced for $880. Let's change that to $880. And one important thing that you're going to see here is that this next approver right now is blank. But once I save this record, because this amount is different than the amount on the purchase order, this field is going to be automatically populated. Better show than tell. So there you can see right now, again, transaction successfully saved, and this next approver field immediately gets set up to Debbie Green. And the reason why that is because we have a different workflow, a different customization running on the back end that allows us to set different people for approvers for vendor bills versus your purchase orders. So maybe your purchase orders always go to your purchasing department. However, maybe when you get your vendor bill and it's off by like, $1,000, $2,000, $3,000, you want it going straight to your senior executive for them to reapprove. And that's exactly the situation that we're mocking up here. Okay, so you can see here, again, next approver is Debbie Green. We can't do anything here except for canceling this bill, which would allow us to re-enter a new one if we wanted to for a different amount. Maybe we entered something in wrong. But otherwise, again, we're gonna have to wait for Debbie Green to go into the system and take a look and prove it. So let's go into the senior executive role. Go ahead and refresh this one more time. And now we see one vendor bill to approve. And we're going to do the exact same thing as what we did with approving the other one. We're going to approve that, and no more approvers are needed. Save this record. And boom, there you go, an open vendor bill, which now our AP clerk can finally go back and pay if they wanted to. So again, let's refresh this. 122 bills to pay. We're just going to open up this page and look for the exact bill that we were working with. It's this one right here, 10/8/2020 for Chipotle Inc. Let's open that up. And now finally, you can see there's some extra buttons up here. Now that it's not pending approval, now that it's actually open, we can apply credit to this bill, we could authorize a return on it, or we could just simply make the payment. And in order to just finish our process off, let's go ahead and just do that real quick. Here you can see that it's going to impact our 2,000 accounts payable account coming out of our 1,000 checking account. And then finally at the bottom, you can see that we actually get a list of all of the open bills with this particular vendor. So we could pay multiple of them at a time if we wanted to, but just for the time being, let's pay the one for $880. So I'll go ahead and save this. Okay, so as you can see, the process that we showed off for both the purchase order approval and the vendor bill approval allows you to integrate basically the processes of multiple people in this kind of approval chain. Again, this is really to make sure that if you're planning an event and you're entering in purchase orders for it and receiving vendor bills for it all the time, that nothing falls through the crack, basically. That if a vendor bill really is off, that you're not counting on someone manually seeing it and then alerting someone to take a look. Instead, the system handles it for you based upon the rules that you've configured in it and given to it beforehand already. Now that really covers the part around eliminating the surprises. Because again, for a purchase order, you might have maybe 3, 4 people looking at it before it even gets entered into your system. And then for a vendor bill, if it's even $1 off, above or below, you could automate the system in a way that says, hey, don't allow me to put this in improved status myself. Instead, immediately send it to a senior executive for viewing and approval before I can do anything with it, like applying a payment or making a payment. So that covers, again, the aspect with looking at the big surprises, avoiding the big surprises. Next, we'll take a look at the reporting. So what you've seen so far is all of the transactions within the system. And the transactions are really your day-to-day. It's going to be what your AP clerk looks at. It's going to be what your AR clerk looks at. It's probably going to be what your purchasing department looks at. However, for your executives, what they care about more is probably going to be, hey, do we have enough cash flow in order to meet all of our open purchase orders that we are probably going to have to pay within the next month? Or, for example, those events, these galas that we held, perhaps for the last 3 years. Let's see how much we spent in each category, which ones we spent more in, which ones we spent less in. Did it work? Did it not work, for example? And we're going to be covering both of those quite shortly. So what I'm going to do now is actually go back into the administrator role. We could also do this in the senior executive role if we wanted to, but just for the sake of simplicity, I'll come back here. And I'm going to type into the search bar one of the custom reports that I have created. And I say custom, but in many ways, all I've done is added a few extra fields to reports that already come pre-built into the system. So this is an example of our open purchase orders that are already in our system right now. So you can see here, this is basically just a bunch of columns showing you the date, document number, who it's associated with, the status, amount, and the department and the class that it's tagged with. And this piece is quite important because a lot of the time you're going to have a lot of purchase orders in your system for a lot of different, well, simply put, events or attached to a lot of different departments that you might want to cut up for budgeting purposes, forecasting purposes, what have you. So you can see that there's a lot in our system already as kind of mock dummy data that show no department or no class. But if we come all the way down to the bottom, you're going to see that I've created a few down here that have both their department and their class already populated. So for example, let's say I wanted to see only the purchase orders that are associated with our 2020 fundraising gala. I'm going to open up the filter, select the 2020 fundraising gala. Boom, there we go. Only the 5 purchase orders are associated with it. And it gives us a nice breakdown of which departments they're associated with as well, which we could organize, we could sort by the departments, we could additionally filter by the departments again if we wanted to. So quick and easy once this report has already been built out. Now, in addition to this, the nice part about the reporting tool in this system is that not only do you get this kind of flat-facing report right here, but all of these different aspects that you're looking at, which I'm hovering over, are drill downable. Essentially what that means is I could click on one of these, like this 850, and it'll take me straight to the transaction record. I don't need to, search for the document number, search for the vendor, and then look through theirs. Nothing like that. I can go right into it. And you can see here, again, this is going to mirror the information that we just saw in our report. It's pending bill for the amount of $850, again, associated with this 2020 fundraising gala and this food and beverage department. So you'd probably be using this open purchase orders report, again, really to be estimating your cash flow needs. So you can see, hey, well, not only do we have $5,000 sitting in our accounts payable, but we can probably expect to be getting another $7,000 added to the accounts payable, maybe within the next month or so. And we really got to plan ahead to make sure that we have enough cash on hand so that we can meet those commitments. So that's one quite important report that you might be able to look at from categorizing your data in this way. Another really important one is, again, just going to be your standard P&L. And how you would look at that in NetSuite is you would go into your reports, financial, and just take a look at your income statement. So your income statement is already going to break down your accounts within your system within a certain time range period. And then what we can do is we can have it be organized and categorized further through slicing it up by those classifications that we had chose before. So for example, I could choose column, class, and as you might remember, that Gala 2020, Gala 2019, Gala 2018 was a class we had in the system. Let me do this, refresh. And what you will see now is right across the top, let me just expand these columns a little bit and zoom in. We have our 2018 fundraising gala, 2019 fundraising gala, and 2020 fundraising gala all side by side here with all of the different accounts that may have been impacted by the transactions living in your system. So we can see at the top here, we have our sales. So maybe we did about 58,000 in 2018 for event registrations, but in 2020, we only did 57,000, for example. And then coming down here into the expenses categories, again, spending money on advertising, equipment rental, your meals and entertainment, et cetera, et cetera. Again, similar to what we did with the purchase orders, we can drill down in this report as well. So let's say we want to see what transactions comprise this $57,000. We're going to click on it, view the detail report, and bam, we see right there in the system, we have a whole slew of cash sales going into our 1,000 checking account for varying amounts. So we can see right at a quick glance that maybe Santa Fe Springs Construction Company gave us a big donation with their registration versus, for example, Eric Korb and Imran Khan, who just bought maybe one ticket to our gala. And then we could go back to the summary and additionally drill down on other sections. So let me just go ahead and refresh for the classes again. Maybe this time we just want to take a look at our meals and entertainment. And again, we have all these different vendor bills within the system already. The one for Chipotle Inc. that I just created for $880 already sits right here. And this is one of the final kind of great parts about what we're doing with having all of this live in one system, is that all of your reporting should reflect immediately. Again, assuming that you tag it with the correct classifications. Okay, so that covers the reporting piece. Again, there's a lot of other reports that you could take a look at, or reports that you could leverage based on the way that we're slicing up our data. But your open purchase orders and your P&L are really going to be the most pertinent ones when it comes to controlling your event expenses. And what I'm finally going to show you before we leave some time at the end for some extra questions is going to be just how simple it is to set up some of those quote unquote back-end customizations or back-end configurations that drove that approval chaining process that we just did. So you might have similar systems or similar capabilities in the systems that you're currently using, but in NetSuite, how you would go about setting those kind of logical process flows up in your system would be going to customization and then workflow, and then setting up something called a workflow. And I'll just briefly show you the one for our PO approval. Here we can see that there's just a single state, essentially saying set next approver. And then there's one action here. And what we've done in the system is basically say, hey, when you are creating this record, this purchase order record, I want you to check for the current user, their purchase approver. Again, as you might recall, that's going to be the purchase approver on their employee record. I want you to check that. If it's blank, then just put blank in the next approver field. If it's a person, I want you to put that person in the next approver field. And you can just imagine that with access to, again, all of these different fields that you've seen on the forms, and again, people having these kind of separated roles out, that you can have a lot of power with just chaining some of these workflow actions together. A very common one that we see, for example, is not only would we want to automatically set the field of the approver, but for example, we could email the purchased order as a link back to NetSuite to the person who actually gets set. That way, they don't have to check NetSuite, like once or twice a day. Instead, they only have to go into it whenever they get that email in their inbox. All right. So that was a lot of information. I hope all of you were able to follow what I was going through, and hope you got something out of it. What I'm going to do is stop sharing for a quick second and just bring our PowerPoint up again. And then I will leave some time for some questions. So if you'll just give me one quick second to bring it up. And here we are. Okay, yeah, so again, like I said, thank you very much for listening. We'll now have about 15 minutes or so for questions. And Terry, if you want to say something to wrap up as well, please be my guest.
Okay, thanks so much, Kevin. I mean, wow, this is, I love seeing things in action. I don't know about you guys. I can appreciate it so much more. I don't have to kind of use my the brain power to think about what it's supposed to look like. I actually get to see what it's going to look like. I do have a couple of questions that have come in. What other situations do you often see that might make recording event expenses more complex?
Yeah, so that's definitely something that we see with larger organizations who might not necessarily have such a straightforward process, like kind of what we've talked about here. One piece that I've already talked about a bit is going to be this multi-level of chaining. So the idea of, hey, you have a supervisor, but your supervisor is not the one approving your purchase orders. That's going to someone else. And then that person's supervisor is not the one approving their purchase orders. That's going to someone else. So that's a big piece that we see with a lot of organizations. Another really big one that we see is receiving multiple vendor bills for one purchase order. There are some vendors who decide, hey, we got a purchase order for X amount of items where we're going to break it up into 2 different vendor bills because that's how we delivered it, for example. So in those particular cases, what we've seen is organizations, if their system allows it, just partially receiving and partially fulfilling their vendor bills and their purchase orders at a point in time, and then maybe waiting, the week, the 2 weeks until they get the additional amount. We do often see that. And then in addition to that, with the reporting, we often see organizations actually mix their purchase orders with their vendor bills. And what that means is you might have seen that in our P&L report, we only had the vendor bills showing on our expenses side. But we could also build out a report that has both the purchase orders and the vendor bills on the expenses side. That way, not only do you get a snapshot of how much you owe really on your books, but you also get a snapshot of how much you anticipate to owe for a particular event in the future. So yeah.
Okay. All right. Good deal. Okay. So what other reporting would you recommend?
Oh, so that's definitely a question that's, again, based on the needs of your organization. We've seen probably everything under the sun for this one in terms of what people want for their reporting. I would say in terms of standard reports, something that I didn't have the chance to cover today, but that a lot of organizations definitely use is going to be your AP aging. And that's super important. Some organizations are very diligent about paying everything kind of like, within the 30 days. Others let them age maybe 2-3 months just because that's what their cash flow allows them to do. So that's going to be a huge one for you, and going to be another huge one where you want to leverage knowing how many open purchase orders you have so you can anticipate more of them coming into your AP aging report as well. So that's kind of a big one there. The second piece I think I would talk about is the idea of more customizations and more additional fields that you would be able to leverage off of. So what we just saw was me using your department as a classification. So, you have your functional departments like finance, accounting, sales, for example. And then we had classes. So this is going to be like your revenue streams. So for example, the different events that you put on, maybe memberships that you sell, maybe donations that you receive. But there's a whole slew of other areas that you may want to categorize your data with. One that we see that is very prevalent among associations and non-for-profits is going to be grants, for example. So, hey, we got a grant for $50,000. We need to track which transactions this grant was applied to. And that's really a big point in terms of leveraging this data and making sure that you have a good process around keeping it up to date and making sure it's not too messy. Because you can just imagine if you know exactly how much money you have spent from your grants at all time, then that alleviates a lot of your worries about going over your grant spend. And that's definitely a situation you don't want to ever be in.
All right. Wow. Okay, it's a lot. It looks like we've exhausted our questions with everyone here. Kevin, I really appreciate you being with us today, or Innovation Technology, for being partners of Review My AMS, all these applicable insights, seeing things in action. And to our attendees, so glad you were here to take in this information. And in light of today's topic, I found some wisdom in the words of Jeffrey Moore: without big data, you are blind and deaf and in the middle of a freeway. Yikes. So go do something, guys. And everybody have a great rest of the day. Thanks so much.
Thank you, everyone.